Is Europe exposed militarily? What does rearming Europe mean economically, and what role should European banks be playing in this case? On this podcast, we will cover these questions as we outline one of the top policy issues facing the continent. The US-European Defense Pact, which dates back to the end of World War II, will never be the same. The Trump administration has told Europe in no uncertain terms that it cannot rely anymore on the US to provide a defense umbrella like it has done for almost 80 years. The recent leak from a group chat of top US political leaders proves that what they are saying is not just for public consumption, but is a deep-seated view providing a new reality for Europe with varying implications. While the new American position may have caused an outcry in Europe at first, it seems that many citizens and policymakers are viewing this as a necessity for a reorientation away from an excessive reliance on the US. This creates a huge challenge for Europe to become self-reliant and establish itself in its own right on the international stage. Just to put some perspective, the US spends almost $1 trillion per year on defense, or 3.4% of GDP. The other NATO members spend on average less than 2% of GDP, and Europe as a whole spends about $300 billion. Just to get an understanding of the size of the US defense spending, it is equivalent to the next 12 countries combined, which of course includes defense powerhouses such as Russia and China. Germany and the UK, which each spend over $80 billion per year, on a combined basis spend less than 1/6 that the US does, just to gain another perspective on relative sizes. Britain, for example, has cut military spending by nearly 70% since the height of the Cold War. Even more worrying for Europe is the fact that nearly 2/3 of European arms imports in recent years came from the US. Analysts say that advanced US systems such as fighter jets are so reliant on US spare parts, software updates, or data sharing that cutting access could effectively render these things useless. To this should be added that there is also the issue of dependency, particularly on intelligence sharing and communication links between Europe and the US. Now, countries such as Canada and Portugal say they're reconsidering future orders of F-35 jets from Lockheed Martin. And the European Union is largely freezing the US out of a new loan financing agreement as the bloc mobilizes hundreds of billions of euros for a military buildup in the next 5 years. There is also precedent for the US taking action against a NATO ally, such as when the first Trump administration suspended Turkey from the F-35 fighter jet program over Ankara's acquisition of the S-400 Russian air defense system. The EU executive branch has now unveiled plans for a 163 billion euro loan program to push military spending, and more is expected soon. It's a boost for countries such as France, a major European arms exporter, which has long sought to limit new defense spending to EU companies, an approach that was opposed by countries such as Netherlands, Germany, and Sweden, where industries are closely interlinked with manufacturers outside the bloc. Another problem for Europe is the following. While Europe makes products such as combat aircraft, the defense sector is largely fragmented across different countries and doesn't match the collective capacity of the US's massive defense industry, and building up key capabilities is a long-term project. We're in a very unconventional moment in history, said Keith Webster, a former Pentagon official who heads the Defense and Aerospace Council of the US Chamber of Commerce. What he says is that, so I can understand, he says, where any nation buying from the United States would begin to think about the possibilities of being denied the ability to sustain a program. Now, there are fundamental and unprecedented moves taking place. Germany recently passed a huge 500 billion euro infrastructure bill, and a second measure will remove caps on spending on defense so as to lighten the fiscal load, which could potentially free unlimited amounts of money in the future. Now, the EU is trying to come together as a union to try and get Europe out of an economic slump, and that's part of the bigger picture. So Europe is really at a crossroads. While it has underinvested in defense for years, it does have certain elements in its favor, such as an industrial base in countries like Germany, and certain countries such as France, Sweden, and Spain do actually have defense industries, making fighter jets, submarines, and other products. But on the flip side, it's the military culture has not been embedded in European countries over the past decades, such as in countries like Poland, Greece, and Cyprus that are always preparing for potential attacks by neighbors and which have routinely spent more than the average EU country in defense spending. Former UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace said, "The West is in free fall in its military recruiting. It's not just Britain at the moment, but young people aren't joining the military." So that's a problem. And as always, culture and way of life enter the mix in economic and defense issues. On the economic side, in a sign of changing times, German car manufacturers have fired employees because of lack of demand. But those employees are being picked up by the German defense industry. So again, we can see the reorientation of people from one industry towards another. Some analysts believe that defense spending will boost output by over 2% over the next 10 years in Europe. There is now a need to have a bigger industrial base and to boost military research, which can also affect civilian technologies. So there is a chance that Europe, with a population of more than 500 million, could do something similar over time and spend on defense while also helping civilian industries. And here is the crucial role that banks can play. As we're a banking podcast, we need to focus on the role of EU financial regulators and financial institutions. As recently as June 2024, The Banker magazine, which is owned by the Financial Times, cited a statement from EU defense experts that European and UK banks were discriminating against defense companies by restricting lending to the sector and debanking customers. This was due to the view that in the context of ESG, the environmental, social and governance criteria, that investments in defense would, quote, not be sustainable. With the war in Ukraine, this interpretation has been challenged, and all over the EU, investment in arms are being seen as a necessity. According to data provider Dealogic, aggregate loans to the EU's defense industry fell from 4 billion in 2018 to just under $500 million in 2023. This is certainly not something you would expect in a geography where the military would be front and center of the political agenda. So it's quite simple, really. European banks must play a much larger role in this effort. The European Investment Bank, for example, will also play an important role here, but commercial banks and investment funds are also very important to this effort. If the thought is that Europe is truly under threat, then it's vital for banks to step up and play the role that they need to by heavily contributing to funding the EU defense industry and making it a pillar of EU economic strategy. This may be beginning. In a letter to its shareholders, which are the EU countries, the EIB, the European Investment Bank, recently proposed to allow investments into non-lethal defense products, providing unlimited loans to the defense industry, should EU countries wish it, and measures to motivate commercial banks to follow suit in lending cash to the defense industry. This move completes a drastic shift in the bank's lending policy in light of the EU's renewed defense push. Last year saw the first major overhaul of those rules, through which the European Investment Bank was allowed in practice to invest in products for predominantly military use, as we said, as long as they do not pose lethal risk and retain a plausible civilian application. Before that, any investment had to go to products with a 50-50 value in terms of civilian and military use. The current rules prohibit investment in ammunition and other purely military production. So this is something that will have to be looked at. In all the EU member states, governments are deciding on investments and build-up of defense, which will also have to rely on increased public sector borrowing. Such a development will further increase the need also for a financially integrated EU, with stronger financial powers at the EU level, and further incentivize countries to make the euro the common currency across the Union. In closing, the banks can now play a crucial role in this huge effort if indeed Europe decides to rearm. Risk in financial markets increase, and banks and market participants need to readjust their strategies to this new reality. It must be clearly stated that funding the military sector will be a linchpin for this effort, and that regulators will have to make this a focus and take the new risks for financial stability into consideration. Financial markets will have to play their role in financing the increases in government borrowing for defense. So this may indeed be a time for choosing, and the choice must reflect the best long-term interests of the continent, whatever those are. If you find this content valuable, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.